the budget hearing this afternoon is by OFB will be to hear, of course, the budget of the Public Defender Service Corporation. And I'd like to, of course, let you know that Senator Pangilinan, the chairperson, sends his apologies for not being here today. Yesterday, of course, he was in Washington, D.C. as a keynote speaker on the military housing privatization initiative, which of course is really important for our community when we're thinking about the military buildup, and with hopes that we'll be able to bring some of those projects outside the fence instead, and that which will be able to help our economy. But the staff continues, of course, to work hard and communicate with you, and they've done the analysis of all of the different departments and agencies about their budgets. And should anyone, of course, have any questions regarding the budget submittal by any of the departments and agencies, that they can call, of course, his office, which is at 473-4236 or 7. And with me, joining me this afternoon again is Senator Tony Ada and Senator Mana Silva Tarhun. And I'm sure the other senators will be joining us much later. So with that, I'd like to ask you to introduce yourself, of course, and who you've brought with you to testify on your budget. Make sure you press the button if the red light goes on. That means you're on. You don't need to bring it too close because you'll muffle, of course, your voice. It's a fairly powerful microphone, but not too far away either where we can't hear you. But please introduce yourself and who you've brought with you.
Thank you, Speaker Wampat. My name is Eric Miller. It's been my privilege and honor to be the Executive Director of the Public Defender Service Corporation since August 29th of last year. To my left is Bennett Charkaloff, our Chief Administrator. And to my right is Cecilia Fernandez, our Chief Fiscal Officer. Thank you. Thank you. We have submitted a budget request for a total of $4,126,843. We think that this is a frugal budget. There are some additions that we are asking for in the nature of training and staff based on the caseloads that we have. The Public Defender's Office has the mission of representing those accused of a crime in the territory of Guam and to protect their constitutional rights. We can't do that if we're not properly staffed. The American Bar Association has established certain standards for capping caseloads for public defenders all across the United States. This is a standard that's been in effect for some 40 years. It takes all the different kinds of criminal cases, felonies, misdemeanors, and juvenile cases, and weights them. The American Bar Association standard is one full-time public defender employee should handle no more than 400 misdemeanors per year, or the equivalent of 150 felonies per year, or 200 juvenile cases per year, or 24 appellate cases per year. In fiscal year 2011, the Public Defender Service Corporation, with 14 full-time staff attorneys and 1 executive director, handled the equivalent of 6,300 and some odd misdemeanor equivalent cases. Based on the American Bar Association standard, we should have been staffed at 16 full-time employee attorneys, not 14. It is for that reason and only that reason that we are asking for a budget to allow for full staffing, that is to add 1 more staff attorney, to bring it up to 15 staff attorneys plus the executive director, who can handle some cases but cannot handle a full caseload because of the administrative responsibilities. Along with that, in order to serve the new staff attorney position, we are requesting 1 full-time secretary for that attorney in the appropriate office hardware that would go with it and be necessary to have that position. In addition to staffing, training is an essential part of an effective law office, and especially public defender. In our budget request for last year, or this fiscal year, my predecessor, Mr. Nisperos, had requested $27,000 for off-island training. None of that was funded. This year we are requesting $20,000 for off-island training. We cannot properly represent our clients if our staff is not properly trained. We've done what we can to do the training at the least possible cost and bring trainers to the island where possible. In May of this year, we managed to host a trial college where we managed to bring 4 very experienced trial attorneys who have done training annually in Tennessee. They came here and trained us for 4 days. They trained the entire staff of the public defender and the alternate public defender. They charged us no money. We paid only their airfare and their hotel expenses. This is a wonderful training. It was effective. We just can't do that every year. So we want to be careful shepherds of your resources, but we also need to be careful shepherds of the constitutional rights of our clients. Every law office needs training for their staff, and that's why we put it in the budget. It was in 1961 that Clarence Earl Gideon was charged with breaking and entering into the Bay Harbor pool room in Panama City, Florida. He asked for an attorney. He told the judge that the Supreme Court required that he have an attorney. The court said no. He was convicted. He represented himself. He was convicted and sentenced to 5 years in a Florida prison. In a handwritten note in pencil on prison stationery, he sent a letter to the U.S. Supreme Court asking that his case be reversed and that he have an attorney represent him. That led to the Supreme Court decision of Gideon versus Wainwright, wherein the U.S. Supreme Court stated that states have to pay for the defense of indigent defendants in criminal cases where jail time is involved. That was the mother of the public defender's office. It isn't enough to simply appoint a public defender to represent indigent clients. You have to be sure that their caseloads are not so large that they can't do it effectively. They have to be funded to the point where they have sufficient training to proceed to give them effective counsel. The problems facing this government are the same as they are faced in all the states. If you'll bear with me for just a moment, I'm going to read just a very short section from Securing Reasonable Caseloads by Norman Lefstein, who recently published this book about the crisis in America. There is an abundant evidence that those who furnish public defender services across the country have far too many cases, and this reality impacts the quality of the representation, often severely eroding the Sixth Amendment guarantee right to counsel. The problem, moreover, has existed for decades as states and counties have struggled to implement the Supreme Court's right to counsel decision. In 2009, 2 national reports about indigent defense in the United States were released. The first of these, Justice Denied, America's Continuing Neglect of Our Constitutional Right to Counsel, was from the National to Right Counsel Committee and published by the Constitution Project. The second report, Minor Crimes, Massive Waste, the Terrible Toll on America, Broken Misdemeanor Courts, was published by the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. This is how Justice Denied summed up the problem. Frequently, public defenders are asked to represent far too many clients. As a consequence, defense lawyers are constantly forced to violate their oaths as attorneys because their caseloads make it impossible for them to practice law as they're required to do, make it impossible for them to follow their own professional rules. They cannot interview their clients properly, effectively seek their pretrial release, file appropriate motions, conduct necessary fact investigations, negotiate responsibility with prosecutors, adequately prepare for hearings, and perform countless other tasks that normally would be undertaken by lawyers with sufficient time and resources. Yes, the clients have lawyers, but lawyers without crushing caseloads, or lawyers with crushing caseloads who through no fault of their own provide second-rate legal services simply because it's not humanly possible for them to do otherwise. funding public defenders is like a problem shared across all the United States. Equal justice is continuously an unfunded mandate. But this is a constitutional issue for these clients. Yesterday, there was testimony by the Attorney General's office about the increasing violent crimes on the island and the burden that's put on their office. Well, it's the same here, of course. If we fail to provide effective counsel, you cannot incarcerate the people who you convict. You can't send somebody to 15 years to life imprisonment at the Department of Corrections if you don't give them effective counsel first. If they are incarcerated, eventually, hopefully, a higher court's going to release them to have another trial with competent counsel that has enough resources and time to properly interview, properly investigate, file the motions that need to be filed, make sure that every possible defense has been pursued, and if he is thereafter convicted, it's a lawful conviction. It is an essential part of our democracy and of our government and of the judiciary that you fund the public defender's office in such a way that we can continue to protect the constitutional rights of our clients. As I said, the only things that we have asked in addition that are an increase from the preceding budget or the 2012 budget are those two items I just mentioned. I think, Sis, the one additional staffing just to bring us within the ABA guidelines of attorneys per caseload, and some amount of training for the staff on an ongoing basis. We had some increased costs in insurance.
Not insurance costs, the
Retirement costs. Okay.
Costs.
Anything else?
I'm going to go down the line.
Okay. Going from 28
to 30.
to 30. Okay.
And that's my presentation.
Thank you very much. And what I'm going to do, of course, is that is to go over the analysis which we've been doing with all of the different departments and agencies who've come before the legislature, and basically what it is to give the public, of course, an idea of what your current budget is that you're operating with, what your request is, and then what, of course, the ceiling is from the governor's office. Now, the executive budget, of course, that was submitted to the legislature came in a lump sum for the semi-autonomous agencies. And in, of course, doing the calculation, because the lump sum was $55.3 million for 2012, and then the lump sum that the governor is requesting is $53.4 million. Therefore, there is a need to decrease $1.8 million. And the semi-autonomous agencies that are affected, are like the Mayor's Council, the Attorney General's Office, the Unified Courts, the Public Defender's Office, the Legislature, OFB, and the Public Auditor. You're having to make that 1.8% cut. Now, I know that quickly the Attorney General's Office kind of took all the departments and agencies and kind of calculated that maybe then it might be 3% straight across the board. But, that's not, of course, a decision made by OFB or even by the senators, when we finally go into a session on the budget packet. But it's important to let you know this, that there is that decrease coming from the executive side of, the government. Now, my understanding as well, and I have to applaud you, of course, and your staff for the fiscal year 2012, is that you've actually self-imposed some decrease in your budget, and with some of the software materials that you needed, and even with travel, like you indicated before, but for this year you were, wanting to put it back for reasons again that you've, justified. Now, in the analysis, of course, where we were looking at the breakdown of all the divisions, and we look at the total amount for your appropriation for this fiscal year was 3.7 million, and then for your request is at 4.1 million, and where it shows a slight increase of 9% of about $330,000. But I guess when you factor in, of course, the self-imposed reduction on yourself, it's just like putting back, of course, so it's almost like a wash, so to speak. But in light, of course, of what the executive branch is proposing, then of course is going to present some problems, and of course we don't like to try to hurt a department, of course, or an agency that is really working to, one is maintain the level that the government can support it, and then at the same time for you to be able to carry out your functions based, of course, on caseloads per attorney. So we can definitely appreciate that. This is a hard one, of course, even for me, and I'm not the one doing this, but just based on what I know from what you've done in 2012, and then of course your needs, and it's kind of, it's really hard to be able to even try to even go through what we have here. But I'll just do it for purposes at least of the analysis, so that you can, and my colleagues will have a better idea, because they're not privy to some of the information that we have. And of course I was going to ask the question about the travel, but you answered it, that having to bring somebody, and of course it would be cheaper than having to send people off, but you've indicated that that was done at really very little cost other than having to pay for their airfare. But in your request, when I'm looking at page 49 of your digest, that you're saying that staff attorneys will be attending these conferences, seminars, or workshops sponsored by the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers and or Trial Practice Institute to sharpen their criminal trial litigation skills. So the trial litigation skills, then, based on your training, you said last year, it's not the same training then. This is something totally different.
Yes, Speaker. Yes, this would be training either in practice skills or substantive law in a particular area. Mm-hmm. For example, DUI defense training, or criminal sexual conduct defense training, sex crimes training. Training on evidence rules, anything that a lawyer would need as part of his toolkit to work for his client and protect their constitutional rights and put forth the best possible defense for them.
Now, what is your policy then, that when you send staff attorneys to go off for training, and of course you can't send everyone, so you're going to send maybe 4 or whatever the numbers
Correct.
are. What is your policy for those who've gone off island for any kind of training, and
Well,
when they come back?
The trainee becomes the trainor for the rest of the staff. They have to bring back those materials and present whatever they can from the training event, so we get the most possible benefit from the cost of that training.
So they'll be able then to train
Yes.
everyone. So you're requiring them then to be
Yes.
able to do that. Okay. Well, that's good. Now, I was also given a note from the staff that about $500,000 was removed from your budget requests, based on your recommendations, because I was asking that question earlier because I wasn't too sure what the dollar amount. So it's $500,000, and then based on that reduction, then actually you're not putting back the full $500,000, because the increase is actually, when broken down to dollars and cents, is that it actually comes out to $330,000 and 88, 330, 100,000 and 88. So that's the 9%.
That's correct, Speaker.
Yeah. So, of course, that is good. Can you share with us, because when we're looking at the percentage changes of your digest, is that on contractual services, because I know the increase is only 18,000, what would that be based on what you were not able to purchase this fiscal year that you would like to have for the next fiscal year?
Insurance and then malpractice for that. And remember you wanted the backup solution service.
We increased our malpractice insurance, and we purchased content insurance for the office.
Oh, we're requesting for.
Or that's what we're requesting for.
Yeah, so it's content insurance
Yes.
for the office and malpractice insurance.
Correct.
And you had requested J2 to ask for
Okay, and that's
We also requesting
the data backup solution service.
some data backup software. Which one?
This one.
Oh, I see, data backup solution service, online backup.
It's
It's
$5,000.
$5,000.
And then Abacus tech support.
And Abacus tech support. Abacus is our case management software.
okay. Thank you. Now I understand that your office space, of course, is the same, but you have actually larger footage for space. So if you've in that, where you weren't able then to negotiate, well, you negotiated, I guess, water, but not power then. So the power has remained
Go
the
ahead.
same.
Speaker, the power is constant.
Yes.
Water is included with the rent. You're correct in that.
Okay.
And I've spoken with our landlord. He has no intention of increasing the power cost to us, despite increases in power
Okay.
rates.
So we're gonna combine then the two, the 48,000, which is water and power then.
Mhm.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. The equipment, it's nominal, of course, but it's about 7,550. What purchases are you making?
Speaker, most of it
Oh,
is.
turn it one.
Sorry. Most of it is due to the 2 new positions. Right. Because, the difference is a net, so, we did receive 23,000 for this year, and then we're requesting for, oops, I'm sorry. Right, so the difference of 7,500 is, most of it is due to the two new staff.
Are you experiencing any problems with recruiting attorneys in LTA positions?
I'm sorry, recruiting
Recruiting,
attorneys?
are you experiencing problems recruiting attorneys, as LTAs? Limited term.
Agreements, like contractual.
I'm confused.
I'm sorry, Madam Speaker, we were given the authority.
Yes.
But I know in my experience, we've only had to do it once. and that was just a very temporary appointment. Thus far, we've been able to hold off, but we're saying we don't know how much longer we can hold off on you know, continuing to overwork the attorney staff that we have now. If the need arises, yes, we do have that authority. It is difficult to recruit because of the limited term appointment.
But my understanding is that it is the quickest way, of course, to be able to recruit. And once you get them on board and you have then a permanent position, that you'll be able then to transition them into then a full-time, position. Because you want to be able to try to recruit them when you're able to, rather than wait and go through the whole long process of, bringing them in, not as limited term, but as a full-time, employee.
I can't answer that, Speaker, because I have not experienced that myself. I have not had the occasion to hire or recruit a limited term employment, except not for the attorney position. We did have a lot of trouble in the MIS division. We had a tech support position.
Computer systems analyst.
Computer systems analyst who was deployed, and we had a great deal of difficulty finding someone for a limited term employment to fill in until he returns or claims his position back from his deployment.
Yeah, what makes that, of course, difficult for you to do that is because while the individual's deployed, their salaries, of course, remains. You can't use it for another position while the individual is deployed. Whereas with a vacant attorney's position that you need that will be currently unclassified, and if you have the funding source, for it, that you're able to do that, to bring in, an attorney, and then later on, then you'll be able to process the individual to, transition into a full-time position.
Okay.
Because it's been, yes, it was a practice, and it's a matter of fact, because of your practice, that the Attorney General had asked the legislature to provide the same authority to give them that flexibility to be able to do it.
I'm sorry, it was the AGs who had that authority. We were excluded, and only recently asked that we be given the same
Authority then. No, because they did too, because they didn't have that authority either before.
And if I'm not mistaken, it has to be in a specialized area of the law that you have the need to.
Yes, for hard to
recruit
recruit
on a
area.
Unclassified term or LT.
Yes. Okay. At last year's hearing, it was your request for a new Dawn Justice Ware system to be prioritized for fiscal year 13 as an anticipated cost. So have you made any move towards making that a priority for implementation this fiscal year?
No, it's my opinion that that should not be a priority at this time. We have the database software that we're currently using is 11 years old. It's not top of the line, but right now it's doing everything we need it to do. We can get more bells and whistles, but right now it's sufficient to generate the reports that we need. We would like to have access to the JustWare for the convenience of our office, but we don't need to purchase new software to do that. We just simply need to get access to their software. So at this time, until such time as we can clearly articulate and understand why we would need to upgrade our software, which may happen as hardware and softwares change, it's not an urgency at this time.
Okay, well, that's good to hear then. How much would this have cost anyway?
$266,000.
Oh, wow.
As of last year's budget, it was 215,000.
Okay, well, that's definitely a savings there then.
And that's not including, I think, hardware. That was like 100,000. Hardware, I think, our IT guy.
And I use the mic on so that.
Is it 100,000? 215 was just the software, but I believe he budgeted 100,000 for the hardware.
in your proposed staffing pattern, includes a funded vacancy that was, to be filled this April. Did you fill that position?
Is it the accountant?
Which position is the speaker referring to?
You had a funded vacancy. I'm trying to find it now on page. Okay, on page 60.
Is this the fiscal assistant?
No, yes, accounting technician.
Okay, number 3.
The accounting technician.
Accounting technician vacant to be filled by April 30, 2012.
Right.
Because
We
that
did-
was a funded
we
position.
did not fill that
So you
position.
didn't fill the position then.
Okay.
And is it, and so and that's going, okay, and so you're putting it back in again as in your proposed?
Yeah, it's my understanding, we had 3 positions that were filled that didn't get funding, which is why in order to fund a new position, we would have had to lay off an existing employee, which we chose not to do.
Okay, so this, all right, so this was funded, is being funded this current year, and, yeah, so it is funded.
Yes, yes.
Now, was your agency, were part of that 15% holdback set aside? No? Okay, so if you, you're right. Yes. So with that then, how is it that you weren't able then to fill this position if there was no holdback?
Madam Speaker, what happened was for fiscal year 2012, the current staffing pattern that we had submitted at the time the budget was required to be submitted, it showed 1 attorney position and 2 legal clerk positions as vacant. But when we came in on July 18th of last year for our budget hearing, we had notified the committee that these positions had in fact been filled. However, when the budget was passed, they gave us funding for the accounting technician new position, but failed to provide funding for the 1 attorney and the 2 legal clerk ones because they were following the current staffing pattern that showed vacant. And so, like Director Miller was saying, rather than laying off one of the 3 that we already had, our chief fiscal officer was kind and generous enough to say, I'll suffer the extra work. Let's just forego hiring or filling the accounting technician position for this fiscal year. And so the workload has not decreased for our fiscal department. As a matter of fact, it has increased. And so we're hoping to finally fill the accounting technician position next fiscal year.
Okay, and then in your proposed budget, I'm trying to find then, okay, so, yeah, so you have then on page 54, then new on line number 15 for an attorney. That's correct, right? That's the 1 position?
She's referring to the new attorney that we're requesting.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
the new one that
That would be
you're-
the new one, yes.
Okay. And then on page 55, your 2 vacant investigator position that's not being funded. So really, so the personnel then will be just 1 attorney, 1 legal secretary.
One, as far as the new position.
That's it, just those 2. Okay. All right. Sanfada, any questions or comments?
I was just wondering, do you get any federal funding for equipment or software technology? Have you guys applied for any federal grants or?
We have 1 federal grant for a stop grant for the victims of domestic violence, which pays the salary of a paralegal to assist the victims of domestic violence.
But that's the only federal
That's the
funding
only
you
federal
get?
grant that we have.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator Tyler? Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't even see it was. I'd like to welcome Senator Frank Blas Jr. for joining us this afternoon. Do you have any questions or comments?
Thank you, ma'am. Two questions. First off, what percentage of your clients are citizens of the freely associated states?
Between 25 and 30%.
Okay. What does that roughly come out to with regards to your cost to be able to provide these services?
25 or 30%.
No, what's your cost?
Oh, you mean
How much?
oh, in
Dollar
dollars?
amount.
This year's current budget, 30% of that would be.
It would be about $1,300,000, something like that. Take 30%. We'll take 25. I think 25 is a more accurate figure. So take 25% of $949,000.
And how much are you short in your current request?
It will be, their request would be 330,000. That's the new request.
So your 900,000. Let's take the low end, your 900,000, right, a year. How many years do you think that that's been your cost? For how many years are you going on?
The compact impact began.
I know that when we were first asked to start submitting reports for the compact impact or the FAS impact on our services and stuff, initially it was like 15%, and then of course it just kept rising. In that respect, I can tell you though that because we have not gotten any reimbursements because the governor says we're
That was the second question I was going to ask you.
right. So we have gotten 0 reimbursements for our agency specifically.
Okay. Ever?
Zilch.
Okay. You know where I'm going to go with it. Okay. So that will be a sidebar discussion that we will be having. Secondly, actually now away from compact impact, what redundancies have you put in place or do you have to ensure that should something occur, should your current facility be compromised, that you're able to operate off of another facility?
Do we have a disaster plan? Is that the question?
We do have a disaster plan, but I think he's talking of like a backup facility for us to.
Right.
I'm not sure what your question is.
Well, if your facility was compromised today, and you had to, and you need to report to work tomorrow, do you have a place to report to work? Are you able to, from that facility, just continue to move on?
No, we do not. No, we do not.
No, you don't. Okay. Is there any plans to be able to look into something like that?
We will.
You caught me off guard. I think we have a disaster plan someplace
We
in
do
case
have
of a
a
typhoon.
disaster plan.
And I'm sure your
But it has
disaster plan
more
is...
to do not with replacing the physical plant, but
Right.
with regrouping, contacting staff, making sure we have our data system backed up in a safe place, and that sort of thing. But we don't have if you're asking, do we have a backup
Physical
plan for
facility.
the physical facility, the
Mhm.
building, you mean? We
I
don't.
mean, yeah, I'm sure, okay, so you've got all of this stuff, but where are you going to take it to?
Right.
All right.
We gotta work on that.
I have no response for that, Senator.
Okay.
I don't know.
Can we work on something like that so that,
Absolutely.
please? Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Well, I don't have any other questions to ask, so I want to thank you very much, unless you have any closing.
No, we appreciate your time.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time as well, and for working with the committee.
Thank you,
And
Speaker.
you know,
Thank you,
I
Senator.
appreciate, of course, the fact that you take the government's situation very seriously by being very frugal in terms of budgeting. So we appreciate that. So
Thank
it's
you.
now 2 p.m. and this concludes then the budget hearing for the Public Defender Service Corporation. Thank you very much.